Georgia O'Connor here. Big up Julius. Ring IQ. Welcome to the relay.
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Reigning WBO welterweight champion Terence Crawford took to his social media and stated, "A lot of y'all YouTubers that just be making they podcast be killing boxing because y'all don't know what the fuck y'all be talking about." Now, which YouTubers he was referencing, which ones specifically, your guess is as good as mine, but I can only deduce that he's targeting this statement towards those content creators out there who spend less time addressing the facts and the actual stories and more time fabricating them. You know, in the build-up of Terence Crawford's 20-minute tell-all video, I heard all kinds of stories, saw all kinds of videos about Crawford having a $22 million demand.
None of these guys will ever tell you where they got that information from. It's always per their quote-unquote sources. The information itself almost never seems to check out.
All you really need these days to sell a story that may or may not be true is a spiffy thumbnail with a provocative headline, and the information itself, whether or not it's true, whether or not the intel is good, well, that really doesn't matter.
That takes a back seat to getting the story out there, whether it's true or not. That takes a back seat to getting a story out there and getting it out there first.
Getting those clicks, whether you're spreading misinformation or not. That seems to be what's important. In this day and age, actual journalism and actual punditry is dying on the vine as a result of clickbait artists and freelancers, independent media.
The business of misinformation has been very lucrative for many content creators here on this platform. I mean, take Glovegate, for example.
How many content creators got how many views and racked up how many dollars off a conspiracy that almost entirely existed on the YouTube platform?
Real world, in spite of Wilder's best efforts to propagate this conspiracy, there actually was no conspiracy or investigation into one.
This statement from Terence Crawford, you just get the sense that these are the kind of content creators and these are the kind of people that he has in mind. This is more specifically what he's talking about, as a good bit of misinformation has been spread in reference to his fight's collapse, his fight with Spence Jr., people making up all sorts of narratives about Crawford and how all of this is his fault.
There's a lot of guys out there, they've made a decision amongst themselves that they're going to rationalize this to where no matter what comes out, it'll be Terence Crawford's fault as far as they're concerned.
I get the sense that this statement Terence Crawford is making is directed towards those content creators and those YouTube channels.
In the build-up of his 20-minute tell-all video, there were a lot of people claiming they had the inside track on these negotiations.
Very few of those narratives were proven true. Spence Jr.'s own candor seemed to do more to confirm what Terence Crawford was saying in his own 20-minute tell-all video.
Errol himself's candor didn't debunk or refute what Terence Crawford was alleging. If anything, it confirmed it.
That you've got two fighters, one a unified champion and another a three-division, two-time lineal, two-time Ring Magazine, former undisputed champion. You've got two guys like this fighting for no money up front, no money guaranteed.
And they're both unbeaten fighters. They're both unbeaten welterweight champions.
And the best that you could offer them, the both of them, was a deal where neither fighter has any guaranteed cash, any guaranteed money up front. There's something very suspicious about that. One might look at a deal like that and say, these guys aren't serious about making this fight. They aren't serious about getting a deal done, because how could they be? How many other promoters would have fighters of this stature, of this caliber, fighting in a fight like this for no money up front?
An undisputed title fight that's taken about 4 years to make at no money down.
My previous video, we talked about Terence Crawford's comments in reference to Spence Jr.'s pay-per-view debut, where he was quoted as saying, when you look at Mikey Garcia, Mikey was never his guy. His
guy being Al Heyman's guy. Al Heyman's horse in that race was Spence Jr., not Mikey Garcia.
At least according to Terence Crawford, who continued, Mikey Garcia was just used to catapult Spence Jr. to a different level by using Mikey Garcia and all his accomplishments to elevate Spence to where he is now. But you gotta think, It was all tailor-made for him being Errol Spence Jr., to build him up. Give him a couple of fights
and build him up so that ultimately him and Spence were going to fight, Crawford said.
Yeah, we'll throw you a bone here and there, just to get you excited and, believing in us. But after the Errol Spence Jr. fight, where was Mikey Garcia?
Errol Spence Jr. made his pay-per-view debut opposite the ring Mikey Garcia, and those just so happened to be Errol Spence Jr.'s best numbers at the box office.
His very best numbers on pay-per-view, as since then, he's been in somewhat of a downward trend. He hasn't been able to duplicate that success with any other fight he's had at the box office, not with the Sean Porter fight, or the Danny Garcia fight, or the more recent Yordenis Ugas unification match earlier this year.
Ahead of the Errol Spence Jr. fight, Mikey Garcia had been campaigning as a lightweight. The fight right before that was the unification match with then unbeaten IBF champion Robert Easter. So how is it that Mikey Garcia gets a shot at Errol, but Terence Crawford is intended to jump?
He's got to jump through all of these hoops, whereas Mikey Garcia had accomplished absolutely nothing as a welterweight. He hadn't actually campaigned as a welterweight before ahead of that fight, yet he gets the fight, and Terence Crawford, he's got to wait.
If the motive behind that fight was to turn Errol Spence Jr. into a big box office draw, they must have failed because his numbers are down since then. He hasn't been able to duplicate that success, making that fight a formality, a waste of time.
And who is he fighting now? He's about to fight Keith Thurman, who he swore he wouldn't fight. He swore he wouldn't give that guy a shot, an opportunity. A guy who sold even less at the box office than Terence Crawford did in his last fight.
In Terence's last fight late last year with Sean Porter, he sold approximately 130,000 to 135,000 pay-per-view buys, whereas Keith Thurman sold even less than that opposite the ring Mario Barrios earlier this year.
For all the heat that Errol Spence Jr.'s fans like to give Terence Crawford for not being a big box office draw, recent figures and recent memory indicates that Keith Thurman is even less of a draw than Terence Crawford.
They still seem to be celebrating that Keith Thurman fight. In a nutshell,
Terence Crawford's evaluation of things, that if you're not with him being Al Heyman, you're on the wrong side. It's a stout observation.
It's the easiest way to put things in one sentence.
In men's middleweight news, ahead of Janibek Alimkhanuly's upcoming fight with the UK's own Denzel Bentley, Bob Arum says,
"We'll pay a great purse for any prominent middleweight to fight Janibek Alimkhanuly. If he takes care of business, like I expect him to take care of business against Bentley, then we'll make a date available for any prominent middleweight that wants to step in the ring and fight him, and we'll pay a great purse. I'm not gonna call out different names and so forth, because all of those names that I would call out have promoters. They take exception. They say I'm trying to poach their fighter, that kind of shit. So all I'm saying is that any top middleweight that wants to make a good price and is willing to fight this guy will finance it and put it on."
The names of Demetrius Andrade, former WBO champion Demetrius Andrade, and Carlos Adames almost immediately come to mind because those guys ain't got nothing big lined up in their itinerary. They've got nothing to do. I don't know why nowadays champions are not fighting with champions, Janibek Alimkhanuly said during a press conference Thursday to promote a 12-round main event on ESPN Plus that will stream from the Pearl Concert Theater at the Palms Casino Resort. I don't think they should be afraid. I am here. I am a champion now. I am here to fight the champions, and hopefully Top Rank can organize my next fight to fight with a champion.
Well, there are only really two other champions at this weight besides Janibek. One is his countryman, Gennady Golovkin, who Janibek himself expressed no interest in fighting because he basically idolizes that guy.
And the other is Jermall Charlo, reigning WBC middleweight champion who hasn't fought in 16 going on 17 months.
He's not going to cross over to ESPN for Janibek.
Janibek is capable of fighting an English guy. Not an Alan Minter, but a good middleweight. A good English middleweight, and we'll take it from there. When manager Egis Klimas asked me to promote him, I told the guys at Top Rank, just sign him. Don't worry. You don't have to look at him in the gym or anything. He's gonna be tremendous. And he turned out to be that way. Now, that was maybe stupid on my part. How do you know? But I just had a feeling about the kid. I really believe he has the potential not only to be good, but for greatness in the middleweight division.
And I actually share in Bob Arum's vision. I believe that Janibek actually has that potential. The real problem, is the era of middleweights that he's in. This ain't the Hagler era.
Do you know that Marvelous Marvin Hagler already had 48 professional contests, 48 professional bouts when he challenged Vito Antuofermo for the WBA and WBC title?
Really had to go through the gears and earn his stripes as a professional before he even got the chance to sniff at an alphabet title, much less two.
That's not this era, let me tell you. Jermall Charlo's a WBC champion, reigning WBC middleweight champion that hasn't fought in 16 going on 17 months, and it could very well be close to 2 years before he returns to action. The alphabets, the sanctioning body,
The WBC are basically enabling him to sit out inactive for as long as he needs to, as long as he wants, without putting his feet to the fire to satisfy any mandatory challengers by way of their organization.
And I'm a sucker for the middleweights because of Marvin Hagler and Carlos Monzon, who I promoted, and Rodrigo Valdez. I've always been in love with the middleweight division, and I think this kid could be in that type of category. I've got a feeling about him. Now, this could all be crazy, could all be nuts, could all be an old man's nostalgia. But that's how I feel.
Like I said, I think Janibek has the potential to live up to Bob Arum's expectations, but the real issue here isn't Janibek per se, Janibek as a fighter, or his ceiling. The real issue here is the era of boxing he's campaigning in. This is not the Hagler era.
these guys are nowhere near as active and nowhere near as ambitious, nowhere near as ferocious.
They're just not. You got the United Kingdom's own Chris Eubank Jr. And opposite the ring, Chris Eubank Jr., Janibek could make some nice coin and be a part of a significant fight over there in the United Kingdom. He could. The problem is, Chris Eubank Jr. is already spoken for. He's supposed to be fighting Liam Smith in a box office fight early next year. And when Chris Eubank Jr. is making the kind of money that he's been making to fight the kind of guys that he's been fighting, he's not going to take a risk on a guy like Janibek Alimkhanuly. Beyond that Smith fight that I anticipate he will win, he could go straight into a Kell Brock fight. Kell Brock, who's rumored to be coming out of retirement.
At least he was before the Conor Ben fight collapsed. The story was that he was eyeing the winner of that fight. Now, the fight fell apart, but that doesn't mean that Kell Brock might not come back, and if he does, he might fight Chris.
So why would Chris Eubank Jr., fight a high-risk, low-reward guy like Janibek Alimkhanuly, even for his WBO title? Why would he do that when he can make a small fortune boxing a quasi-retired welterweight in Kell Brock?
Just telling you, don't hold your breath for Chris Eubank Jr. to give Janibek the time of day.
I think Janibek's best bet to get a notoriable fighter, a familiar face and a familiar name in the ring would have to be Demetrius Andrade. And what's it going to cost Top Rank to get Demetrius in the ring with Janibek?
Remember what Bob said. They want to get a prominent fighter, a prominent middleweight in the ring with Janibek.
Prominent really isn't the word I would use to describe today's Demetrius Andrade, though being honest with you, I don't know that many other prominent middleweights, quote-unquote prominent middleweights, running around out there that you could get in the ring with Janibek. Your best bet really is Demetrius, but what's that going to cost you? Bob Arum is faced with a unique problem to where he has a world-class fighter, a world-class talent with a high ceiling, but promoting him could still prove to be very difficult.
Demetrius said something about wanting to fight Caleb Plant next year. Caleb Plant is spoken for. He's fighting David Benavidez.
Demetrius Andrade himself not having a huge following, the best money for him might very well be in the middleweight division opposite the ring. Janibek Alimkhanuly. Beggars really can't be choosers.
Beyond this weekend's fight, I don't know what the hell they're going to be able to do for Janibek.
Guy's a high-risk, low-reward guy. He's a hot potato. There's no other way to put it. And finally, men's lightweight news. Per tweet from veteran boxing scribe Steve Kim, both sides, both the Gervonta Davis side and the Ryan Garcia side, are still trying to iron out a fight between Tank Davis and Ryan, I'm told. Again, not done. May not get over the finish line, but they're still discussing this bout for January. And we're in November, folks. We're in November, ladies and gentlemen. The clock is ticking. If it really is their intention to iron out a deal to where these two guys share the ring in January, time is of the essence.
Because of the shared notoriety of the both of these fighters, perhaps they wouldn't need as much time to promote this show as they would someone else.
Two other fighters that don't have the same cult following that Ryan and Gervonta have. Perhaps not, but, we're already well into November.
Gervonta Davis took to his social media and quite cryptically tweeted January, without a hint of who he'd be fighting in January. We can only assume that it's Ryan he was talking about.
And perhaps it was, but it's hard to imagine that they can reach a deal where everybody gets what they want. Somebody's going to have to show some gimme. Somebody's going to have to sacrifice something. The bulk of the interest for this fight, the bulk of the interest for this show really does lie here in America. So whoever gets the American broadcast rights for this fight stands to benefit the most. And it's hard to imagine that two promotional outfits and two platforms that are as invested as these two platforms are as invested into both of these fighters, they're just going to acquiesce to what the other platform wants.
You give up the U.S. broadcast rights for this fight, that's the bulk of the revenue, the bulk of the money, the bulk of the interest.
I maintain my original position. The most amicable situation I can think of at this point in the juncture is a situation to where DAZN gives up the U.S. broadcast rights for the fight, but streams it everywhere else. Streams it in Canada, streams it in the United Kingdom, and any other territories that they cater to.
To compensate for all the money they'd be missing in America, where Showtime would presumably have the broadcast rights. That's the only way you can work it out to where everybody can get something out of this. And who knows what the real hurdles are, the actual hurdles, because I'm just bouncing ideas around.
I feel like because Gervonta Davis is some years older than Ryan Garcia, been around longer, been in the limelight longer, and because the boxing community at large, for some time now, has been demanding that Gervonta Davis fight in a real fight, a signature fight, a big fight for some time now, that Gervonta needs this a little more than Ryan does, because Ryan's got time on his side.
He is younger.
But Gervonta, if this fight don't happen for him, what does he do? Rolly Romero rematch? What, Isaac Cruz again? What have you got?
I feel like comparatively, Ryan has a little bit more wiggle room than Gervonta Davis. I mean,
he's made it crystal clear that he's not fighting for alphabet titles, so he doesn't really have that pinning him down. He can fight anybody from 135 to 140.
Whereas with Gervonta, how long before we start seeing reruns and repeats? I mean, how long, really? How many options do they have for him over there on PBC Island?
We're just gonna have to wait and see what happens.